I would like to discuss with everyone in this call. We only have 7 people in the call right now. It seems to be a slow day, but it doesn't matter. Probably we'll have more, and if not, at least we have a discussion to share, hopefully. So, as you know, we just needed to create a situation within our statutes that we will be able to prepare for resolutions in writing, so people can take part in voting processes through casting their vote in writing. So we sort of fixed all of that, and thanks also to Lilia and Steve and Greg for helping me with all the logistics to make that possible. So we have now handed in all the documents, and we are awaiting positive feedback from the registry, hopefully before Christmas. And we've had a conversation. We started to have a conversation last week around the question what RChain Europe is actually, in what direction it is actually evolving, and what is the vision behind. So I think it's just interesting to state that we have started from a certain point, which was very closely tied to the technology that is produced in RChain US. And since things moved in a slightly different direction, where we just had to halt this process for the moment and think of other ways to develop our mandate, something just emerged, and many of you have been part of. And I think we realized over the past weeks that we seem to have a slowly emerging vision of what it is that what we can do together, where our capacities lie, where our interests lie, and where maybe also our calling is from what is going on in our day-to-day politics or in the world around us. So I think this vision becomes clearer and clearer, but still it's not defined. We haven't mapped it. It's not put on paper or anything. And also, I think it would be really good to have a situation where we can plan a general meeting with those that are already members of RChain Europe, and also those people that maybe would like to become members of RChain Europe in the future, if they would only know better what it is that we are going to plan. And I think it's very important to ask the people, not only for us, especially within the board, to take any decisions and come up with proposals, but to really open the conversation also to other people, especially those who have been in these calls since months now, who have been contributing to the conversation and who have shared their thoughts, their ideas. So I'm really thinking of a good strategy on how to open that discussion and how to make sure to capture all the different thoughts, and then coming up with an agenda and items of business for a general meeting in February, or maybe it will be early March. Let's say how quickly we can get this together, where we just can create a better understanding of where we're heading towards. And I would just be curious to maybe ask this group of people that are here in the call what their feeling is, what it actually is that RChain Europe has been doing or is doing, or what they would like us to do in the future. And I would just invite you to share your thoughts on that. And whoever feels like starting is invited to start.
Let me post something in the chat.
Yeah.
Just going to post something in the chat. I don't know if you can pick that document up. So those of you that come to the Expression of Wish working group meeting, so we established a charter for the working group. And obviously when RChain Europe was set up, one of the things we needed to look at was identity, and the other was Expression of Wish. And so we set up the Expression of Wish working group to investigate that. And we wrote a charter, draft charter, and towards the back of it, last week, we asked people to contribute to the goals that we had for Expression of Wish. So and I've pasted the link in, that has Leah's, Andreas's, Nick and myself goals, which we may iterate on, but just so that you guys can see stuff that's already there, because it's possible that some of these, possibly all of these goals, get promoted up to what RChain Europe is about. Right? I'm just throwing that out there. And I have sort of thought, so if I wrote down my one goal, my one big goal for RChain Europe, so if I looked back at RChain Europe 5 years from now, if I'm still alive, right? So 5 years from now, it's probably that we are the go-to place for anyone wanting to understand how to involve more people in distributed governance from the ground up. We have the technology, and we then, at 5 years from now, have the skills to be able to understand how to wield the technology in the best way to achieve wider participation of people in the decisions that they need to make in the communities that they're in. So I'd like us to be that go-to place. When people talk about, oh, we need to undergo a transformation to involve more people, I think, RChain Europe. That would be my overriding, overwhelming goal.
Thank you for that, Steve.
Steve, I think it could, I agree with that. I think it could be broader, though. If it's not directly, as what, not just, if you like, governance, but I think it should also be concerned with the doing of the thing that is governed, if that makes sense.
That's what I mean by the skill around it. It's the skills to enable you to do. So I think we might be on the same page.
But that's, well, yeah, but I was thinking in terms also, if it's about, I think there's a lot here about cooperativism. This is a new way, a new economy, a new way of working. And it's not just the governance of co-ops, not just the way that co-ops, if you like, make decisions. It could also be the way that that co-ops identify themselves, the way that they communicate with each other, the way they exchange value, token exchange value exchange between co-ops, the way they relate to government around them. So I think there's a lot of, if you like, systems thinking about the way, a layer above the technology of RChain. And to some extent, a lot of this type of thinking is, if you like, blockchain or infrastructure independent. This is the layer above that which enables social coordination at scale. So we're separating out, Greg's assertions about what RChain is about in there. There's the stuff in there about making the world a better place and about it being social coordination at scale. But there's a layer of technology underneath that. And I think that's where the strength of the RChain US cooperative is. I think the complementary strength of RChain Europe is the layer above, and that's in the way that social coordination at scale could work in all its aspects, governance included. And we're starting with the governance stuff, and we're doing work. Well, we're doing work for RChain US in governance. So we're looking at their governance committee, all that sort of stuff, and the way they do charters and things. And we're looking here at governance tools and how that works, for the Labour Party. But there could be other stuff that we should do. I think I'm pretty keen on looking at things like value transfer, the way that that co-ops can actually cooperate. That 2 trillion of value locked up and fragmented across tiny co-ops globally, with no possible way of exchanging and leveraging that value to punch above their weight in the global economic. This is about, I think, going off on one, this is about gilets jaunes for cooperatives. This is the thing where we could mobilize we could provide a mobilizing infrastructure, the thinking around that, to do that digitally for those. So it's a digital gilets jaunes type thing. But anyway, that's a bit of a rant. But I think it could be. So I think in terms of the RChain Europe, it's not just about the governance thing. It's about all of those things to do with, cooperativism, coordination, collaboration.
Yeah, I would also second that. And
buy that?
of course, everyone is invited to give their viewpoint. I just very quickly want to underline what Nick was saying. I'm sitting here in the basement of Supermarkt. I'm sorry, but it's because on the ground floor we have an event going on. It's all about system thinking. This is a series of events we are running which deal with the question of how we need to shape the organizations of the future, right? So everything that has been said to me also points towards building these new organizations while being informed about the systems they reside in, right? And with a special focus on co-ops. This is something I would be very interested in. And if I see the number of people that join these events and the necessity that everyone feels, and this is really, it's something you can see growing and evolving, especially lately, where I think it's obvious that a lot of the traditional institutions and approaches that we have learned do not work anymore. So for me, that's a direct and very practical outcome of our governance work, value transfer, and building an ecosystem also of co-ops. It's really the question on how to design these organizations. Just quickly to second what you have been saying, and I would like to pass on the word to anyone else who feels that he or she wants to share their thoughts on this. So maybe I can ask Greg.
Well,
that would be great. Hi, Greg. Good to see you.
Hey, it's good to see you as well. These are all. It's really good to hear everyone's perspective. I think I would be interested in connecting the goals to time. In particular, I'd love to be able to see, some kind of sequencing or partial order on various goals in such a way that we understand what we feel together needs to have our focus first, and what we feel together needs to have our focus second, and so on. In particular, in my own work right now, I have an engagement with mycelia that they need to know sort of how much support they can expect from RChain, and because they're providing some kind of identity layer that would fit with the music service, and we have Life ID that's also providing some identity infrastructure. And I know that in order to have a proper vote for RChain US AGM in October of 2019, the votes have to be related to some notion of identity, and so on. So for me, I'm feeling a lot of urgency to put together the thoughts that I've been carrying around about identity for the last couple of decades, so that in such a way that both the conceptual framework as well as the way to realize that directly on the RChain platform can be seen, so that people can get a lot of bang for buck. Having reviewed a bunch of these code bases now for identity, I'm in a position to be able to say with clarity and certainty that they've got a lot of stuff going on, but not nearly as many features as they could have if they had less stuff going on.
Here, Greg. Yeah, the stuff. But having looked at your paper, I say it's fantastic. There's some really, really insightful stuff there. I think it would be really good to point out those deficiencies, the specific deficiencies in the self-sovereign identity infrastructure today, and point out the things which make big differences. So the big drivers which make the stuff that you've got in that paper really, really important. And I think for me, the thing which is really important is that welding together of the concept of individual and, if you like, social collective identity as if you like, two aspects of communication, collective, so let's not go into the paper now, but there's some really good stuff in there which could make a huge difference to the very fragmented way that individuals and organization identity are treated today, and the mess that gets into, and how that isn't scalable to do the sort of stuff we just talked about, where we talk about doing things cooperatively at large scale. So I think there is some really good stuff there. It's just, I suppose, it's how to work with the massive identity industry out there, which is very resistant to change, and we need to find friends, I think, to work with on that. So I think
absolutely, yes,
partnership strategy for it.
No, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I think all I was trying to do was to focus, was to say, if we were going to treat this as a backlog, right, of all the things that we want to do in terms of our goals, what would the group feel is, really needs to be done first in order to enable a bunch of stuff, and what needs to be done second in order to enable a bunch of stuff. And just for myself, I'm just looking at the pressures that I feel, because I know I've got this AGM meeting just barreling down on me. October is but a blink of an eye away, and in order to have a real electronic system where I can vote, like, is the platform coming along? Will we launch mainnet? Yeah, no problem. I'm not worried about that. For all the challenges and everything, I know we're going to get that done in more than enough time. So where do I need to apply my own particular skills and talents in order to make sure that AGM vote takes place on top of the platform? And that's that. And so then when I look at my own stuff, I go, okay, in order to have that happen, I've got to have a notion of identity, which means I've got to write down all of the all the basics, so that I can work with a few developers to get an identity system in place. And yes, of course, that will also involve partners and working across. But that's where I think if I do if I make one sort of Tai Chi style move, that would be the one that gets the most bang for buck. And I'm curious in this group, how are people thinking about, the organization of the backlog of our goals so that we get most bang for buck?
Yeah, let's hear some other voices. Let's hear some people that we haven't heard. For instance, we have Stephen with us, and we haven't seen you in a while.
I'm just back from Africa.
No, good to see you.
Steve, welcome back. Glad you're home.
Matt also, hi. Hey, Stephen, I would love to hear everyone's perspective on that. Do you feel like sharing your thoughts on what?
I may have missed that last bit because I was stepping outside I'm now outside on my phone, so I'm connected twice. So I missed the last bit of what Greg said, so I can't actually respond with a reasonable thing. So let's see what Ned has to say, and I'll try and pick up after that.
Okay. Ned, good to see you in the call. Would you like to respond to that?
So it's the priorities of what we feel we need, right?
Right.
From a higher use case perspective, I'm just trying to think. It's interesting. Well, to me, it's, we have to get this level 1 platform completed. And I think, as Greg has been proposing, we need behavioral types, but we know that's not going to be in mainnet. I think rent is not going to be in mainnet, and I think that's going to be okay. We're going to have one main shard, the root shard, which is okay to start with. But like these 3 things, I need to be fast follows afterwards. Like, even if we get the parent shard up to 10,000 transactions per second, and it may be more 5,000 to 7,000. I mean, trust me, that's like better than anybody else is doing. And once we add sharding, we're going to, kind of smoke the competition. So, so it's really hard. And, so that's like at the platform level. And I think we still need to push and get some really consumer friendly dApps ready on day 1, such as our song, but filled out with many more songs and artists. And I know Fabian is working on that, because, we can't throw the switch on mainnet and then have it do nothing and just sit there, not being used. So what's going to drive the most transactions once we go live? So anyway, that's my perspective.
Ned, I want to thank you for that. Maybe we can just zoom out a little bit the focus from also the necessity, and I completely understand your position, because you are facing those necessities now, and I know that you are heavily involved in the software development. But I just, maybe when I pass on the word to Stephen, who hasn't been that involved, but you have your own perspective on RChain Europe. So we have been collaborating since a couple of months. So can I ask you, what is your perspective when we talk about defining the scope of RChain Europe in the near future, and asking the members of RChain Europe where they want to see the organization to go? Dan, I would just like to hear your thoughts on that.
Me or Ned?
You, Stephen.
Yours. Okay, so making sure I'm following. I know that a lot of people don't actually understand what it is that RChain Europe does. Like, that's the big punchline of what is it that RChain Europe does. And I know that's a lot of what the expression of wish and trying to develop government controls and getting there. But what I'd like to see happen is I'd like to see RChain Europe be able to be some form of revenue generation for the combined collective of cooperatives through whatever things necessary. Things like what Rubicon wants to do with RChain is understand blockchain, which they don't. They don't understand the community. They understand that it's a useful service, but they're now learning that they have a real serious competitor out of Switzerland. And this is a thing that could have been discovered sooner if we had more ability to look into what it is that Rubicon needs, right? Like, having some form of money coming in the door so that people can do what it is that they're going to do will be a thing that helps RChain, at least RChain Europe. It'll help RChain US too. Like, more money means more answers to solutions or more answers to problems. But I guess I'm not sure I'm answering what you're asking, because what I've seen in the last month is a lot of what you and me had been talking about for various things to happen at RChain could all very much apply in a bigger and more meaningful way in developing nations. Like, I just saw that in Africa. They need some version of a non-banked bank, right? Decentralization matters out there because they don't trust banks, because banks, up until this current guy, who's an enormous, the current guy that runs Uganda right now is a corrupt monster, and he's the best president they've ever had. Prior to that, it was Idi Amin, who was a vicious dictator. Prior to that, it's warlords. Prior to that, they're a British colony. So they are an entirely unbanked community, or country, something like 10% of the population exists. And they are now all very interested in ways to send money that don't involve physically sending stacks of cash. Physically sending stacks of cash is the only way to reliably do it. In fact, it's so unreliable, though, because you can only send, the biggest bill they have is a 50,000 shilling bill, which is roughly 10 euros.
Right.
Like, that is not helpful in any way, shape, or form. It's like briefcase full of money kind of stuff. And so they pay significant amounts of cash to use something that's called mobile money, which is controlled by the, I don't even know what to call them, not ISPs. It's the cell phone networks, MTN, Airtel, Vodafone, right? And you send an SMS to send money, and they pay enormous amounts of transactional fee. Like the low value, the lowest amount that you can get is only when you start sending literal millions of shillings at a time, and it's a 12% transaction fee. Alternatively, you actually have to go and physically bring people the cash because they actually won't use banks. And Ethereum will matter there in the near future. They're already opening up exchanges. I met with Binance and I met with Moezi, which is a local group. I met with an agribusiness incubator that wants to start purchasing serious industrial machinery from Europe, which is why I went there in the first place, using cryptocurrency as the method of exchange. Because otherwise they have to use this weird currency and these weird platforms to try and get shillings into euro.
Yeah, M-Pesa though, we can't knock it too much because, you know, as a national infrastructure, it's was far more innovative and ahead of the stuff we've done in Europe and the stuff we've done in the US in many cases. So it is, yes, you know, it has made the Safaricom the de facto banking infrastructure for Tanzania and for Kenya, but and clearly, you know, that those tech companies, they have now become the default banking network. But remember that most of what they have over there in terms of banking is basically banks which can't afford or can't work with people in the high street. So, you know, they've done very well to get what they have. And, you know, perhaps it's building on top of. The way you get to scale is by building on top of what they have there. And, you know, thinking about wallet infrastructures, thinking about the governance associated with that, thinking about, you know, how you establish a platform, how you grow a platform like that, how you get that to scale. Because several attempts at doing exactly that, you know, Bitcoin, BitPesa, for example, I don't think hasn't had a lot of traction so far. But, you know, it's how to do that and work with, you know, national countries in Africa. I mean, basically, Africa is a continent. You know, it's fantastically diverse. Millions of different cultures. It's hugely complex. So having a strategy that works, you know, in individual countries with governments is the way to get there. It's not going to happen sort of overnight. So yeah, you know, it's a fantastic opportunity, and there are some great individual national situations over there which we could absolutely exploit.
So, hey, I just was thinking of something, if I could jump in for a second, because I was listening this morning that you know, how Venezuelans are against the government are personally buying Bitcoin. I forget this exchange they have, but you actually set up a meeting and you hand somebody a boatload of cash and they hand you like a Bitcoin wallet address. And they're also doing this in Argentina. And so maybe what we really need on RChain, not doing it that way, but as a truly, you know, somebody to build like a truly zero proof, decentralized exchange where two people can freely exchange rev, right? And then have the security with the zero proof that one is not going to swindle the other, right? Because, you know, then it's like you send it first, no, I'll send it. So maybe maybe we're not
Or-
even looking at it the right way, where we have to bank the unbanked. Maybe we just have to give them the personal freedom to do what they need to do.
Yeah, like or smuggle drugs or undermine exchange rate
I don't
policies
believe in that because
and
the
so
US.
on. Yeah,
I don't believe in that
it
because
depends. So these are complex
no,
situations.
but when you say that, listen, the US dollar is the biggest black currency in the world, right? So people are people. And the US dollar is used for more drug deals and killings than Bitcoin ever was used for.
I can prove that to that point, Ned. In Uganda, if you want to purchase heroin, they only will take US dollar.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to maybe bring the focus back to,
Okay.
to the original question. No, I mean it's really interesting. What I see here is maybe not so different thoughts and perspectives. But I've been writing all your comments down, and I'll certainly create a document on that and try to capture also in the coming calls as much input as possible. Because I just wanna underline what Stephen was just pointing at. Yes, I mean this is all about budget and funds. We are totally aware of that. We are working very hard on leads and trying to close those deals. It's just a matter of time, and we can't accelerate that. We can't speed up things in an unnatural way. So we are working towards all of that. We are handing in grant applications and all of that. But just as important as the monetary side of things is to have a clear understanding of what it is that we are doing, because otherwise we risk to become some sort of strange agency that is just driven by the project that bring revenues into it. And since we are cooperative, and since we have members and we want to have more members, and since we want to really create something interesting, I have the feeling it's just equally important to have a shared understanding of where we're heading towards and what is really relevant to us. And this is also what I just want to make sure to capture and put it out there for debate in preparation of a general meeting. I think it's totally, it's fantastic to think about potential partners in Africa, in other places in the world. It's all good, but for me, it's also then the question of who can be the partners. How tangible is all of that, and what are actually the things that are close to us right now, where we have already created value and where we can start from. And this, to me, slowly starts to stand out after working on this topic for basically since Archon 3, which is not that long of a period of time, right? So my feeling is just that it's just equally important, because we want to make sure to have the clients with whom we would like to collaborate, and we want to make sure to lead the project in a direction where it's really based on our focus and interest. But Steve, I see you Steve Rost-Talbot. It seems as if you want to add to that.
Well, just thinking sort of, the goals, the longer term goals, Nick, you, me, and others that we've expressed, they're entirely consistent with the objectives that RChain Europe was set up to meet. The only reason we can't do that is we don't have any money. That's dead simple, right? So that's why we're doing what we're doing. But I do think, I think we need to think beyond. And I think that's why it comes down to this. But partly because of the situation that we've all found ourselves in, and plus time is moving on. So, and the world around us is changing as well. So I think figuring out what the goals for Europe are, the longer term goals, it is a useful exercise, because we were formed with the view of delivering an identity solution and an expression of wish platform. That's what we were sort of charged with doing. Can you do this, guys? We set you up, do this. But there was assumptions about the state of cryptocurrencies at the time that, alas, ended up not being the case, out of everyone's control. And so there's a funding gap. So we haven't changed RChain Europe as a whole. We haven't changed any of that. And that's still the way I think that we're generally working. Why we're raising the money we are is to keep us in the game, so that eventually when things right themselves, and there's all sorts of things that may happen. And there was an interesting report from the World Economic Forum about blockchain. And there was also an interesting article that was on LinkedIn recently that sort of predicts the end of blockchain. I'll share that link with you because I'm writing a response to that one. They obviously don't know about RChain, otherwise they wouldn't have said all the things that they said. But you know, I think we need to look beyond the delivery of that. The delivery of those things, identity and the expression of wish. You know, I'm confident they will happen. I just can't put a timeline around that right now without a budget. If I had a budget, I could, because then I could have resource, right? So you know, they will happen once the funding side of things gets sorted out. But when that does get delivered, I think we need to look further ahead and to sort of like everyone else's points that were made. The reason for developing those two pieces of functionality, the notion of identity and how we might use that in the context of expression of wish specifically, are the bedrock from a technology offering perspective for all of those other things that have been talked about. They're the starting point. They're not actually, they may not be the end point, but they're the starting point. They allow us to look at organizational ways of working together that's supported by technology. And as a result, we learn. And as we learn, we can start pivoting in the directions that the community of RChain globally potentially needs, and those people interested in using the platform. But I think it's good for us to be known as something. And for me, the idea that we're known for all the things that you guys said, you just said it. I kind of meant all that you said, Ayla and Nick. I just didn't say it as well, right? Okay. But I completely buy into that. And part of the reason is that if you look at European institutions of governance at any level, right, including the cooperative movement, Europe's often been at the forefront of figuring out new ways of working together, because we've had a lot of wars on our soil. It kind of makes sense. A lot of wars on your soil, you kind of don't want to do that. You know, hence the EU was born and all the rest of it. These are all just ways of us organizing ourselves at different levels within the society that has that experience that it can bring to bear, which is why Berlin is such a hot place to be if you're into decentralization, or Barcelona, or there's a few other places, right? So for me, it kind of makes sense. Well, you know, this is what Europe's known for. We're known as the continent that developed more modern ways of getting along together. Sometimes they failed. We have wars, but you know, we're conscious of that, very conscious, and that maturity, I think, is quite important. And so it makes sense for me that that's kind of what we become known for.
Yeah.
Well, let me respond to that with two different things. For one, now that I'm back in Europe, Ella, if I can help with grant applications or anything like that, please let me know. I'm happy to do that.
Yeah,
thanks. And if I remember correctly, the expression of wish meetings are on Tuesdays, or are they on Mondays?
They're Tuesdays. So
I'll start coming to those regularly, because I'm now here for a fairly permanent amount of time, so long as immigration goes well tomorrow. Because what I'd like to see is, I love the project that is Expression of Wish and developing it. But the thing that I see lacking as someone that hasn't been to a lot of meetings is, what is the dollar value add that that project offers? What is it that can make that project make money? Like, that's a sucky way to look at it, I understand. But if the problem is a funding issue, and this is what the project is, let's see if they can be related.
They are related. I mean, part of the reason we're talking to the Labour Party isn't because, you know, we're all, you know, left-wing socialists. It's actually because there is there will be a budget to do stuff, and a budget to do stuff that seems to be aligned to what we want to build. Hey, that's good, because then you get money to build what you want to build.
I don't mean to a left-wing socialist kind of concept. I mean, what is it that will make Visa want to purchase that? What is it that will make someone want to buy that as a service, or is that not something the Expression Wish wants to be a part of?
I don't think that we are at the...
You were not at that, yeah, not at that point. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, no, but maybe we really didn't get to the point where we would be able to define a product. I think what we have been doing is to really get an understanding of what governance means in different contexts and what it means for us as a group working on that topic, trying to map the ecosystem, see who is out there working already on the topic. There are so many different levels tied to that. Also, as Greg pointed out, the question of identity is closely tied to that. This is a super complex field. So I think we made progress in identifying people, resources, research, and potential partners that can help with that. And I think that is already, it's a great deal of any product development, right? For me, this is like the very first thing. I think, nonetheless, your question about the dollar value is really fair. And I would like to invite you to join next Tuesday's
I'll be there.
And maybe bring this question to the table, because that would definitely be a place where we can discuss that more in depth. We are discussing money. It's not that money is a topic that is excluded here. For instance, we have been discussing value transfer, value accounting as a topic, not only in the Expression of Wish call, but also here in this call last week. It's just, I'm afraid we don't have a quick answer right now, but yeah, as I said, you are very much invited to join this group and ask a question and maybe represent a different a different energy that also reminds us that we about the urgency of this aspect. It's not that we forget about it. No worries.
I'm well aware that RChain Europe has not forgotten the urgency, and I look forward to being there on Tuesdays.
Okay, guys. The thing is, we need to stop in time today. I'm very sorry, but it's just that I need to go back to our Theory U event that is about to close, and I need to go back up quite soon. So unless there are any urgent points that any of you would like to share,
Ella?
Yeah,
please,
yeah. Bill.
I'll make them quick. But in line with what the topic's been today, I've written down there's 5 things that come to mind. One is how the academic issues that we're talking about translate and become relatable to the common person, so that they can understand it, they can relate to it, and they can input it into their own lives and their own businesses. Secondly, focusing on the cooperative as we do, I think about, but don't we want to also help perhaps the centralized, flatter organization relate to what we're talking about and then incorporate that into their own structure as well? Particularly, larger organizations take enormous amounts of time and resources in order to input change into themselves. And, do we want to be positioned as an entity that can help them, or are we going to stand in a position that is actually, like, to some is going to be seen as an opposing view? So I think it's important that, we think about that. And, I do think about, the Labor Party's brought up quite a bit, and just to what Steve was also, I think, talking about it, that's one angle, one side, but I think we certainly want to relate to the others as well as much as we can, so that we actually have inclusion at scale, rather than being branded as, just one-sided type of an organization. And only if you're thinking of a certain way do you go for help over there, and if you're not, then you don't, because then we're creating divisions, and I don't think that's anything that we want to, unintentionally happen, And then finally, I just think that the user experience needs to be as friendly and as simple as possible. So I think we're a long ways from that. but at some point, and it kind of goes back to the first point about how do you take the academic and you translate it so the common person can understand it. It's just that you know, the tools in the end got to be simple, and they got to be easily understood. If I go and Google, you know, identity, expression of wish, I get a bunch of insurance information. You know, there's got to be other people talking about this in other terms. So that's it.
Thank you very much for this, Bill. Very valuable point indeed, especially your reminder of really connecting to regular people and making them understand what the relevance of these debates are, because we do not want to create an elitist kind of thing that no one can ever relate to. It actually it's very much tied to regular people's lives, but I think it's probably all about making that visible. And also, yes, to facilitating change processes and consulting flat and central organizations. Yes, why not? Because I think they probably need it most. So I would just like to second that. Thanks for that. I've captured all your contributions. For our meeting next week, I'll make sure to have it ready on a document so new people that join the discussion can have a look at it, and I'll send it around with the agenda. I just want to, yeah.
I just want to just say that, you know, that there, how do I say this? I do hope that people recognize that there's an urgency to this project. It is hard to express the scope and the scale of the transformation that we're about to go through. You know, already my family has been impacted. The fires in California burned out my wife's sister's house. And you know, so they're, you know, fortunately for Malibu, right, those were mostly wealthy people who could handle relocation. But in the upcoming decade, we're going to see massive relocation, and the kinds of services that we're talking about, including identity and banking the unbanked, are going to be absolutely necessary to handle the displacement and relocation. So I do hope that people are thinking about that with a certain kind of urgency, because it is barreling down on us.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for reminding us about that, Greg. And I think you're absolutely right. And also sorry to hear about this. I think,
well, yeah. it's actually been a good thing, right? Because my wife and her sister and her family have been able to reconnect. So it was a positive influence, but what we're, you know, when I hear things like, you know, selling to Visa, yeah, maybe kind of, but Visa is subject to the same kind of changes that the blockchain was. In a blink of an eye, circumstances can be completely overturned, and we need never lose sight of that.
Absolutely.
Thanks for reminding us about that. Dear people, I'm very sorry. I need to leave the discussion. We have 1 minute
I'll
to
say
go.
another time.
I'm asked to go back. I'll see you next week. Have a good day. And thanks for being there. Bye-bye.
You. Ciao.
Thanks, everybody.